There is a tribe that still practices cannibalism today. There is another that kills any stranger who approaches their island. And there is one that shrinks the heads of its enemies and uses them as trophies. You are going to learn about the 10 most terrifying tribes on the planet, and some of them still exist. The world is enormous. And while most of us spend the day on our phones, in shopping malls, or having coffee, there are groups of people living in a way that seems taken from another century or another world. I am not talking about exotic and beautiful cultures. I am talking about tribes that have practices that will leave you with your mouth open. Some are dangerous, some are mysterious, and all of them have stories you have probably never heard before. Most people think the world has already been completely explored, that there is nothing unknown left. But the truth is that there are still tribes that have never had contact with the modern world and that actively reject any attempt of approach, sometimes in a violent way. And that's not all. Some of these tribes have rituals and traditions that go against everything we consider normal. But who are we to judge? Let's just understand.
Number 10. The Sentineles. Let's start with perhaps the most famous of all. The Sentineles live on a small island in the Indian Ocean called North Sentinel Island. It is an island protected by the Indian government, which means that no one can get close. And it's not just because of the law, it's because they themselves do not want any contact. In 2018, an American missionary named John Allen Chow tried to make contact with them. He was killed with arrows on the beach. Before that, in the 90s, the Indian government tried to make contact a few times, throwing coconuts and gifts from boats. Sometimes they accepted, sometimes they responded with arrows. We do not know anything about their language. We do not know how many people live there. Estimates say it may be between 50 and 500 people. We do not know almost anything, and they clearly prefer it that way. The most disturbing thing is to imagine what would happen if you showed up there by accident. Imagine having a drifting boat and arriving on that island without knowing where you are. It would not end well.
Number 9. The Cororowai. The Cororowai live in Papua, in Indonesia, and they are known for one specific thing. Their houses are up to 35 meters high in the trees. That's right. Houses in the trees at an absurd height. But what really draws attention is not that. For a long time, researchers believed that the Cororowai practiced ritual cannibalism. According to reports from members of the tribe itself, when someone was considered a kahwa, basically a sorcerer who causes deaths, that person was killed and consumed by the group. Currently, many Cororowai have already had contact with the outside world, but there are still isolated groups that live in the traditional way, and the stories about cannibalism are old enough to be documented by anthropologists. It is not a practice of random cruelty. For them, it makes sense within the logic of their culture. But either way, it is something that most people would never be able to imagine being part of everyday life. Number 8. The Pira. This tribe is frightening in a different way. They are not violent. In fact, they are relatively peaceful. What is disturbing about the Pira, who live in the Brazilian Amazon, is how much they challenge everything that science believed it knew about language and human cognition. Their language is considered unique in the world. It has no numbers, it has no concept of past or distant future. It is based almost completely on the immediate present, on what they can see, hear, or touch right now. Memories of things that happened a long time ago simply do not exist in their grammar. The linguist Daniel Everett spent decades living with them and ended up leaving the religious life he had because of the Pira, basically because he was not able to convert any of them to Christianity. When he tried to tell the story of Jesus, they asked, "Did you see Jesus personally?" He said no, and they replied, "Then why would you be talking about it?" It is disturbing because they make you question what is real, what is worth believing, and how the human mind can function in completely different ways from the ones we know.
Number 7. The Yanomami. The Yanomami live on the border between Brazil and Venezuela. It is one of the largest indigenous tribes in the Amazon and is known for being extremely warlike. Conflicts between Yanomami villages are frequent. They have a complex system of alliances and rivalries between groups, and violence between villages is part of the social structure. But what is really impressive is what they do with their dead. Their funeral ritual involves cremating the body and mixing the ashes with banana porridge, which is then consumed by the family of the deceased. For them, this is a way of keeping the person within the group. Death is not the end, it is literally incorporated by those who remain. In the 80s and 90s, the Yanomami suffered one of the greatest modern indigenous tragedies. Miners invaded their lands, brought diseases, and killed hundreds of people. To this day, they fight for the protection of their territory.
Number 6. The Wrani. The Wrani live in the Ecuadorian Amazon, in a region rich in oil, which makes them a target of constant conflicts with companies and governments. But before becoming known for that, they were known for one thing: being extremely skilled and lethal in the art of war. They use blowguns with darts poisoned with curare. The toxin paralyzes the muscular system in minutes, and they were known for killing anyone who entered their territory without permission, whether missionaries, explorers, or members of enemy tribes. In the 50s, a group of American missionaries tried to establish contact with them. 5 missionaries were killed with spears on the bank of a river. The case became world famous. Today, part of the Wrani has contact with the outside world, but there are still groups that chose complete isolation, and the Ecuadorian government recognizes their right to that. Number 5. The Munduruku. The Munduruku, from Brazil, were historically known as warriors who decapitated enemies and mummified the heads as trophies. Not to scare, but because within their cosmology, the spirits of defeated enemies brought fertility and good harvests. The practice was gradually abandoned over the centuries of contact with colonizers and later with the Brazilian state. But the Munduruku still exist. There are about 14,000 people living mainly in Pira, and they still maintain an extremely strong cultural identity. Today, they are known for resistance to hydroelectric plants on the Tapajós River. Munduruku leaders have traveled around the world to denounce the threats to their lands. The head-taking warriors who decapitated enemies became activists who speak in international forums. It is an impressive transformation, but the stories about the ancient rituals continue to fascinate researchers and to frighten those who read them for the first time. Number 4. The Shivaros, also called shuar. Have you ever heard of tzantza? It is the name for the shrunken heads that the Shivaro, also called shuar, made with the heads of enemies. The process was like this. After cutting off the enemy's head, they removed the skull and boiled the skin several times in water, then filled the inside with hot stones and sand to shape and shrink the face. The result was a head that looked like a miniature with still recognizable features. They did this because they believed that trapping the spirit of the enemy inside the shrunken head was a way of capturing its power. And this was not something done in secret. It was celebrated in feasts that could last for days. In the 19th century and early 20th century, these heads became highly sought-after collection items by Europeans and Americans. Museums and collectors paid fortunes for them. This led to a horrific market where some heads were falsified, using bodies of monkeys or of people who were not even enemies of the shuar. Today, many museums around the world are returning these pieces to the shuar communities in an attempt to repair this historical mistake. Number 3. The Dany. The Dany live in the mountains of West Papua in Indonesia, and they have a mourning ritual that is probably one of the most shocking you will hear today. When someone close died, the women of the family cut off part of their own fingers, not the entire finger. It was the tips. The logic was to express the pain of the loss in a physical way, and this was done for generations, so many older women have hands with several fingers amputated at the tip. The practice was gradually banned over the decades by the Indonesian governments, but it still existed in the second half of the 20th century, and some older women still carry these marks. The Dany were also known for frequent tribal wars. They were ritualized battles with a lot of performance, but that could result in real deaths. And the men stored the fat of the dead enemies to use on the body. They believed that this transferred the strength of the other to them.
Number 2. The Agoris. The Agoris are technically not a tribe. They are a Hindu religious order that lives mainly in Varanasi in India. But they enter this list because their practices are disturbing on a level different from anything you have ever seen. The Agoris believe that to achieve spiritual enlightenment, it is necessary to transcend all concepts of pure and impure. And to prove this, they do things that most people cannot even imagine. They live in cemeteries. They meditate sitting on bodies during cremation. They eat human flesh from bodies that were thrown into the Ganges River. Some drink from human skulls, and they paint themselves with ashes of the dead. All of this has a deep internal logic within their philosophy. For the Agoris, Shiva is present in everything, including what society considers impure. And by approaching what everyone rejects, they believe that they get closer to divinity. But for anyone from outside, the scene of an Agori sitting in a cemetery next to a burning body, drinking from a skull, is something that will stay in the mind for a long time. Number 1. The Cayetes. And we reached the top of the list. And this is especially disturbing because it has a direct connection with the history of Brazil and with a name that you have probably already heard in school. The Cayetes were a Tupi tribe that inhabited the coast of the Brazilian northeast. In 1556, they did something that completely changed the relationship between indigenous peoples and the Catholic Church in Brazil. They killed and ate the first bishop of Brazil, Dom Pedro Fernandes Sardinha. The bishop was shipwrecked on the coast of Alagoas when he was captured, and the Cayetes carried out a ritual of cannibalism with him and with the other survivors of the shipwreck. The consequence was enormous. The priest José de Anchieta and other Jesuits, who previously defended that the Indians could not be enslaved, changed their position in the case of the Cayetes. The justification was that a people who practiced cannibalism over a representative of the church could be legally enslaved. The Cayetes were practically destroyed as a people in the following decades, a combination of wars, slavery, and diseases. Today, there are no more Cayetes as an organized ethnic group. It is disturbing for 2 reasons. First, for the act itself. Second, because the consequences of this act destroyed an entire people. And all of this happened here in Brazil less than 500 years ago.
The world is much bigger and much more complex than most of us imagine. These tribes are frightening because they're different, but many of them also have stories of resistance, of survival, and of cultures that resisted centuries of pressure to disappear. There is no way to watch this video and not think, what will people say about our customs 500 years from now? Probably some of the things we do today will also seem shocking to those who look from the outside. The difference is that these tribes did not try to dominate the world. Most of them just wanted to be left alone.
If you made it this far, you will probably like the next video as well. It appears there.